Welcome to the Medovia Menopause Podcast, your trusted source for information about menopause and midlife. Join us each episode as we have great conversations with great people. Tune in and enjoy the show.
Hey, welcome back to the Medovia Podcast, where we explore the intersection of midlife health, leadership, and workplace longevity. Today, we're diving into the topic that many women are only beginning to recognize and talk about openly, the connection between neurodiverse, hormones, and midlife. And for many women, ADHD or autism is not identified in childhood, but emerges or becomes more visible in their 40s and 50s as hormone shifts affect focus, emotional regulation, and execution functioning. And for high-achieving women, who have spent decades masking and performing at high levels, this stage of life can be both confusing and powerful. So joining us today is Chellie Adler, a leadership coach, speaker, and the founder of R.E.A.L Women, a platform dedicated to helping women unlock their potential, navigate burnout, and build lives and careers that reflect who they truly are. Through her work, Chellie supports high-performing women who are navigating identity shifts, leadership pressures, and the invisible expectations that often come with success. And in today's conversation, we will explore what happens when neurodivergence intersects with midlife, how hormones amplify challenges around focus and regulation, and what this means for women who are leading teams, building careers, and trying to stay healthy and resilient through this transition. Chellie, I'm really excited to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here and spread more awareness and hopefully empower more women on this journey.
Yeah, as I said before we went to air, I've been reading a lot about this lately, this ADHD connection in midlife. And, we talk often about how menopause and cognitive changes happen during this time, but how does ADHD and autism intersect with hormonal shifts during this phase?
Well, the biggest piece I think to highlight is that this is the reason this comes to light, the reason that this is more apparent in this transition of perimenopause and menopause time is because it persisted beforehand, but the ability to mask it, the ability to hide the symptomology goes away because as the estrogen and luteinizing hormones drop when you're in perimenopause and then through the menopause process, it feels so different because these scaffolds and structures that women had created to support themselves fall away. These resources that they had relied on for decades are no longer accessible to them. And now suddenly you feel like your body is not your own, your mind is not your own. The way you could move through your life suddenly changes and becomes 1,000 times harder. Mm-hmm. And it's unfortunately at the intersection of when women are in these mid to senior level positions in their professions. It is when they are hitting their stride, when they are understanding their managerial and their leadership styles, and they are hitting it because just like anyone, they can be amazing at their jobs, but then suddenly these cognitive structures that supported them are no longer accessible. They are forgetful. They are scattered. They have short fuses. Their frustration tolerance disappears. Their filters, their regulatory ability just is gone. They can't sit still. The clothes that they previously loved are now weights and hair shirts. And it's just a really difficult transition that sees thousands of women leave the workspace. I know you've talked about it in several of your talks before about how women in menopause are leaving the workspace because these workspaces are not set up for their success. And this is just another extension of that.
Wow. Yeah. And I think it's just, thank you for giving us a few examples of what that looks like in real life. I think that it's important for our audience to understand that. And if I hear you correctly, what you're saying is that the tools that they have built that allow them to be successful in the workplace no longer work any longer. Right. The tools that they had set up no longer work. So they're leaving the workforce, or perhaps they're struggling. We hear that a lot from women in menopause. We're just struggling and we're just managing and trying to get through the day. Why do you think beyond the out-of-body experience that they're experiencing and the tools that they're noticing no longer work, why are so many high-performing women recognizing that this is tied to menopause? I mean, how do they unpack that? How do they identify that? What's the aha moment?
The biggest one, the most consistent one that I have seen in my profession is their kids. When
Mm,
their kids are getting diagnosed, when they are filling out, whether you have had this experience or professionally or personally, to go through the process of an ADHD or autism evaluation, there's a lot of documentation. There's a
hmm
lot of questions, whether from the provider or surveys that you have to fill out. And as they're filling them out, these clients that I'm working with and patients that I see are like, this is me. This is my experience. And we'll invariably have the conversations of, have you ever been evaluated for ADHD? Have you ever talked about neurodivergence? And
hmm
as we talk about it, you cannot use, like, the Vineland is a very popular publicly sourced document that's used for children, but the ASRS is one that would be for adults. It's a self-report. And I ask them these questions, but you have to alter the presentation, because do you get up very often when sitting is required? And for many 40, 50, 60-year-old women, they're like, oh no, of course not. Like, if you're a religious person sitting in church, the expectation is that you sit down. As a midlife woman, we sit down. We know that that's appropriate. So I ask, do you desire to get up? Do you have the
mm
urge to do that? Not that you do engage in those activities, but does the desire exist within you? Because we are social creatures. We have been shaped through social sanctioning, whether through a parent, a teacher, a religious leader, whatever that is, to understand, okay, no, moving, fidgeting is not okay. So I need to sit still. I want to. I'm jumping out of my seat in my head, but my body is sitting still. So for women, the presentation of our neurodivergence is often very shaped by our lived experience. Does that make
And
sense?
what's different, it seems to,
Fascinating.
yeah, it's really fascinating. And what occurred to me while you were talking, it's like, okay, we have fully developed executive functioning skills, which would make us get up if we didn't have those fully, if we didn't have that kids don't have, but that we're experiencing a difference in our brain now that is impacting this. So let's unpack this a little bit so that I can fully understand. Estrogen plays a role in executive functioning
Yeah.
and dopamine regulation and focus, which I imagine is, if not the one of the key things that is happening in the brain right now to have some of this scaffolding, as you say, go down. Talk us
Mhm.
through that. Like, what is happening in the brain that is sort of now causing us to want to get up, as you say, or not be able to focus, or gosh, show up in my room and in my kitchen and try and remember, like, oh, I was going to do that, but then I go over here and do this instead, right? What's happening for people to really understand, like, the brain is changing?
Well, just like for women when they're having children or become pregnant, and then that postpartum section, when the hormonal shifts, when the estrogen goes up and down, our ability to access dopamine for people with neurodivergence, typically with ADHD, there is a deficit of dopamine. So when the estrogen goes down, that dopamine seeking behavior is amplified, meaning that, and I have a wonderful clip or a little meme that talks about cheap dopamine versus real dopamine, because invariably doom scrolling, junk food eating, shopping, these kinds of cheap dopamine hits become like a high, because I'm chasing dopamine. I need the dopamine. Let me get there. And as you are recognizing, okay, I need these dopamine hits to be okay, your behavior is shifting. And like when you talked about the change in executive functioning, I just walked into this room and now I don't know why I'm here, but I see that the dishes aren't done. Let me start to do the dishes. Oh, but wait, I don't have any clean dish towels. Let me go to see. Oh, now the laundry's not done. So let me come back. And then you circle back. You've had 7 different side quests and you never even got the first task completed.
Yes.
That that is
Yes.
That is the function of when our hormones drop out like that. And then you're like, geez, I'm a crazy person. I've been walking around here for 2 hours and I got nothing done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we're talking about right now, anyone that's experiencing menopause, right? Our estrogen declines, we have this happen. But when estrogen declines, what happens neurologically for women who may already have ADHD or autistic traits? Well, you talked a little bit about that, but can you give us, can you dive deeper into that and give us a greater understanding? Because I really think it's important for our audience to understand because it's manifesting differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The hormonal shifts, the drop in the estrogen and the luteinizing hormone that happens let's rephrase, we got to do it correctly because in perimenopause, it is not just the drop. Perimenopause is the roller coaster. That's when the ovaries and the pituitary gland are kind of fighting and the amounts of hormone release are going to be fluctuating. And so sometimes you're going to have enough estrogen and everything will work and the machine will keep going. So you'll feel like, okay, maybe it was a bad week, it was a bad month, whatever. And perimenopause, as we all know, can last quite a long time. So then you begin to build structures in place to support yourself with that in terms of lists or apps and all of these different things. You rely on what previously was very successful, like willpower, I will remember, to-do lists, all of these different cognitive scaffoldings that we talked about that built your career ladder. And so then once you hit menopause, which I'm sure your listeners already know, is that single point in time with 12 months without a period, that's when the ovaries effectively have decided that they're going to bottom out with the estrogen level. And then that's when the neuroplasticity stops. That is when those cognitive changes that were going, that ebbing and flowing of estrogen flow, you then reach like, this is where your body is. This is what your estrogen level is going to be. And your brain has to then reset to, okay, this is how I'm going to function. This is how I'm going to process the dopamine that you do have. Does that make sense? I feel like I just muddied the
Yeah,
water.
absolutely. No, it does make sense. I'm wondering, if I am someone, let's just say that I have ADHD. I'm moving through perimenopause, right? My hormones are fluctuating. The tools that I used before may not be as helpful because my estrogen is fluctuating, right? I feel crazy. Not quite sure what tools to use. I reach menopause, so my estrogen level bottoms out. The question that I'm going to ask is that a point where if I have ADHD, I'm now leveled out and this is my new reality? So are you seeing that people with ADHD are better able to cope once they reach menopause? So is it the perimenopause stage that it is the most difficult from the clients that you're seeing within your practice? Just a curious question more than anything.
The most successful in terms of individual resolution, ability to attain joy and happiness and peacefulness inside their lives are individuals that were wondering like what was happening to me. Like, am I going crazy? Am I failing at life? And these kinds of horrible things that we say to ourselves. And in supporting these clients to discover for many of them for the first time that they weren't neurodiverse, that they had ADHD, they had autism, all of these different things, and then to unpack what that meant for them, and then to resolve how can I live successfully with this diagnosis? Like, is this a death sentence? Because there have been clients that I supported that had this framework around neurodiversity that, like someone with autism needs to be in an institution. I actually had a client say that in my office.
Wow.
And I looked at her and I was like, so I should be in an institution? And she was like, what? And I was like, I have autism. My doctor diagnosed me a year and a half ago. And she was just like, well, wait a minute. And I was just like, it's just your understanding and where you want to be. Do you want to hold on to this idea, or do you have the ability to maybe look at this a different way because this is the reality that you're inside of? Hormonal shifts for autistic women do lead to cognitive overload, social fatigue, sensory sensitivity. The lower estrogen for women with ADHD enhances distractibility, task initiation difficulty, emotional reactivity. So all of these different aspects that once you learn, like this is not you, your personality, these are parts of the way your brain works. Can you
Right.
be okay with how your brain works now?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Quick pause here because this matters. Medovia is proud to be the first and only organization in the U.S. offering a menopause-friendly membership and accreditation for workplaces. We're not a trend. We are not check-the-box benefit. We're a movement for lasting change. We're helping organizations of all sizes shift culture, support their people, and retain experienced talent. Whether you're looking just to get started or ready to lead the way, we've built a roadmap rooted in best practices from hundreds of employers across the globe. If you want to learn more, head to menopausefriendlyus.com and find out how to become a workplace that doesn't just talk the talk, but walks it. Because menopause is a workplace issue, and the best organizations know it.
So, how do people distinguish between normal midlife brain fog and something more systemic, like neurodiversity? Because what you described all over the place happens to me every day.
Yeah.
Well, the differencing, oh my goodness, see? The reality is that the structures that they relied on before, the ideas that allowed you to be successful in your 20s and 30s and 40s, depending on, where you are in your chronology, if that worked before but doesn't work now, starting to look at that and then starting to pull it apart, because to just say, well, I have brain fog, I'm in perimenopause, I must have ADHD, you're taking a lot of leaps right there. So giving yourself permission that it's on the table, it is something to look at, but then you have to really start to pull apart, because if you had never had the ability to walk into a room and remember why you were there, or walk into a room and you only ever forget while you're there. It is the pivot and the change and then breaking it apart. Like, yes, if you only focus on brain fog, I guess to answer your question in a tangential way, there if you're only using the metric of brain fog, it's hard to say whether it's ADHD or perimenopause. There has to be other things to look at. It's not just one symptom.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I want to move the conversation to corporate environment, if we can. I'm wondering, many midlife women describe masking, right? Decades of masking in their corporate environment. What does that look like for women?
The definition of masking is the suppression of neurodivergent traits in order to conform, to your environment. So whether that is, well, and I want to make sure that we are, with full disclosure, that women on average mask in the workplace because we live in the world of men. Women have learned how to speak men, but we absolutely live in the world of men. So we mask our uncomfortability often. The off-color jokes, the too cold in the summertime, too hot in the wintertime office environment, the way the lighting is, all of those things, women tolerate them because you don't want to make waves. You, as a woman in the workplace, you don't want to be the mouthy woman. You don't want to make trouble, all of those things. That's masking. Beyond that, neurodivergent masking, the overhead lighting, the lack of temperature control, the overstimulating sensory environment. Those are all, if you tolerate them, even though it makes you grind your teeth, that's masking. And unfortunately, as women in their 40s and 50s who are high performers, they're going to start to encounter masking fatigue, where you have swallowed it down and swallowed it down for decades, that now you got nothing left. You've got nothing left for it. And when I'm referencing teaching again, but when I was on the college campuses, I would go to my colleagues' offices, and the women always had lamps. There were always floor lamps and desk lamps because the big light.
Yeah.
No, neurodivergent women do not want the big light. And
So
it was
interesting.
it was the easiest tell in the world
Hmm.
because you could go into the men's office and I would ask, I'd be like, doesn't that light bother you? They're like, what are you talking about? It's a light. And as opposed to if I walked into a female colleague's office and I turned on the light, they'd be
Yeah, too much light. Yeah.
too much light. Too
It's
much light.
interesting because you took the thought right out of my head. You answered the question that was in my bubble. I'm wondering, gosh, it just sounds exhausting masking for year after year, decade after decade. It's exhausting, I'm sure, that burnout rate is significant for senior leaders.
Oh, absolutely. Women leave the workplace in the perimenopause and menopause state. The statistic I read was, I think, from 2019, yeah, right before the pandemic. And on average in the United States, 85,000 women between the ages of 40 and 50 leave the workplace.
Wow.
And obviously, everyone has their own story, but that's a pretty specific age window
Yeah.
Yeah.
for that to
Yeah.
happen.
One
And
in 10. 1 in 10 women leave the workplace. And that's it. That is so much financial implication to the company
Mhm.
and to our economy and to their retirement plans. Like it's stunning. But what happens to identify when woman realizes her flaws were actually neurological differences? Like what, you talked a little bit about the person you were talking to, where it's like, oh no, I don't have autism. I don't know. I mean, because that's this. But what happens when women realize that, and how do you help them?
Well, we we very often have to process a lot of anger first.
Mm.
There's a lot of anger, resentment, also a lot of grief.
Yeah.
Grief around these ideas that they spent years thinking they were too much, too loud, not disciplined enough. They were inherently less for any of the various reasons that they were masking, that there was something wrong with them. So we have to do a lot of work around processing the environments that you were in, that your emotions are valid, that you have every right to be angry, that you supported a system that did not support you, and these kinds of ideas. But the beautiful part with that is the grief comes hand in hand with the liberation,
Mm.
that freedom, that idea that it wasn't you. This whole time, it was never you. You were not flawed. You were not broken. It was the environment was not there to support you.
Mm.
I think that's interesting because you really can't realize that until you reach midlife. There's no way you would have described to me in my 30s that all the things I was feeling wasn't me, right? It was it just wouldn't have made sense to me. And now I'm like, yeah, whatever. Who even cares? Right? You get what you get here.
Mhm. But
Well, and
I can see the grief though, right? I
Yeah.
can see the anger, I can see the grief, and that's normal to have to work through that with any change or new news, I guess I would call it. That those are normal emotions, right?
absolutely. Well, any level of transformation
Right,
requires mourning. You have
right.
to recognize that the ideas that you had, the thoughts that you had around it are changing,
Hmm.
and you have to grieve it and then sweep away the rubble and keep
Hmm.
going. Because for women that are able to recognize and embrace this new reality for themselves, they become such more powerful and empowering leaders. They are so unencumbered. They're not shackled with these internal insecurities, these doubts and fears anymore. And they are liberated to soar and to watch. Like that was why I started Real, was because the focus around and I'm sorry, I didn't ever clarify. Real is an abbreviation for Rise, Empower, Aspire, Lead, because I wanted more women to be able to embrace this opportunity, to be able to see how amazing they are. They always were, but they are right now today. And to because the frame for, I don't know if it was your lived experience, but when I was young, the change was something to be afraid of, and like,
Mm, mm.
your life is kind of over,
Yeah, you're old. You're
Yeah. Like you're dry, like that whole maiden mother crone era. Nobody wants to be the crone. I don't want to be an
Mhm,
old, the old lady with the hood and these
mhm.
things. Like that was this horrible narrative that the patriarchy foisted upon us, as opposed to, no, I am liberated. And yeah, I am dangerous to the status quo because nothing you can say can hold me back now.
Let's
So,
talk about that.
yeah, let's talk about that because I love empowering women, and it sounds like neurodivergence can actually be a competitive advantage in midlife
Oh, 100%.
because of all the reasons that you just mentioned.
Well, and the nature of neurodivergent thinking is fabulous in its application, because when neurodivergent individuals are supported, whether it is through their environment, cognitively supported, emotionally reassured, and those things, they excel at pattern recognition, systems style thinking, innovation, rapid problem solving, all of these really valuable
Mm.
tools that any corporation, any leader would look for in an employee, someone that you want to guide your organization. These are the people that you want. When supported appropriately, these traits are a strategic advantage.
Do you think that there's a misconception or misunderstanding from corporate leadership about neurodivergence? And
Oh,
just
yeah.
generally speaking, I mean, when you know all of those benefits and the skills, I think, well, of course,
Yeah.
of course, there's a competitive advantage, right? But do you think, generally speaking, that there is a misconception that we stereotype that, we're missing the boat?
Uh, Absolutely, without question. When you look at it, the realities around who makes up the C-suite, who sits in those chairs
Yeah.
are normally men.
Hmm.
And men and neurodivergence looks very different than women and neurodivergence, and how that neurodivergence has been supported. Because very often neurodivergence in men was identified in childhood.
Hmm.
So those supports were put in place at that time, and they either sank or swam with them. And
Hmm.
so now, 30 years later, that's already fundamentally integrated into who they are as an executive, as a human, and all of those things. Whereas these female executives did not have that support. So they are 6 to 10 times more powerful because they overcame without the support, and they
Yeah.
still bring those skills to the table.
Yeah.
Mm,
Scrappy.
Mhm.
That's the
yeah.
word that comes to mind. Hmm.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
So if I am listening to this and it's resonating a lot with me, and I'm like, totally get it, a lot like how I feel right now, honestly. But what do I do? What do I do? What do I do to support myself? How do I do better at work? What do I find a doctor? Like, what do I do if I'm hearing like, yeah, this is something that that might be me.
Okay. Well, and as we are experiencing this, as we are becoming, as the conversations are happening, whether it's, it feels very weird to almost advocate, but people watch these social media videos, and every third person has ADHD and autism and all of these things, but it brings them in the door. It brings them in the door of their primary care doctor, of a neuropsych or a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And that is a great way to start, because if you want the diagnosis, if you want that validation of the diagnosis, go to a professional. You need to go to a certified individual who can give you those results, because then you jump off from there. If you are not somebody that values the diagnosis or net needs that diagnosis to move forward with these ideas, then looking at specifically executive functioning support, because right now, for if you are a midlife woman who is experiencing these changes that we're talking about, the drop in estrogen changes how the dopamine works. And so your executive functioning, even though your brain is fully formed, your executive functioning is starting to collapse. because your ability to navigate the way you historically did doesn't exist and isn't available to you. So the availability of executive function coaching. I am not as big a fan because the certification process isn't there. Like, I'm a certified executive coach. Okay, did you take the 3-week online course? Like there's a lot of
Be careful.
variability. Yes. Be an educated consumer in how you get there. There are certification processes. As a licensed therapist, I went through the autism certification and the ADHD certification through our oversight bodies. I'm in Pennsylvania. We use PESI. They're a national organization. Starting there, if you are not in any kind of talk therapy, I absolutely recommend. I think anyone over the age of 27 should have a therapist.
Yes.
But going to a therapist who is trained, who is certified in ADHD and autism, so that you can start to have these conversations, to look at where you feel the gaps are, what you want the support in. And then should that be a focus that you want to look at, there are stimulant medications, there are non-stimulant medications and stimulant medications. So for those of us with health challenges, if you have a heart issue, you can't take stimulant medication. So there is something else that you can take if that's something that you feel would be beneficial. Mushroom coffee, lion's mane mushrooms have been demonstrated to have extremely supportive faculties. L-theanine, there's a gum that is extremely popular with some of my clients, a neuro gum. I have not. This is not an endorsement of it, but some of my clients come and are like, yeah, I just chew the gum when I need to focus a little bit and I feel great. Like, that's great. So I don't need, and I am not a huge, like, you should go on medication. That is every individual person's decision.
Well, and on that note, what do you think about hormone therapy or non-hormone therapy, but related to menopause? Does my, estrogen patch help me in any way?
In terms of your brain function and the ADHD symptomology, it absolutely can provide support. It certainly can, because are you doing the bioidentical hormone patches?
Yeah. And it's helped with my brain fog like a million.
So the reality is then that is supplementing and supporting you in the way that your brain works, so that you are able to you're not losing the scaffolding.
Yes.
Is where we're going. And for many women, I myself included, I am on progesterone from my gynecologist, and it absolutely can contribute to the success.
Interesting.
Fascinating.
That's a whole nother podcast altogether.
What I know, I'm like, gosh, it's just fascinating. What other accommodations, support, if I'm an employer, should I be thinking about to support employees who might be having challenges? What can I do as an employer?
Absolutely. The biggest one to be paying attention to, I think, and dialed in, and that's, I think, across the board, that leaders need to look at, is watching for signs of burnout. Burnout is going to be, usually that is the easy trigger of like, oh, hey, there's something happening here that we as the leaders need to dial in and look at. We need to pay attention to, something's going on here. How can I support this employee who is so valuable to me? And I want to keep them in there. If you are seeing your subordinates or clients or whomever, are they rehearsing conversations before meetings? Do they over prepare? Are they very, very stressed out about avoiding mistakes? Do they mimic other communication styles so that they're suppressing their own, so that they can say, okay, this is successful, let me do this, forcing eye contact so that it's almost awkward, because they're so amped because they want that high performance, but the neurological cost is extreme. And so they're going to burn out. And that's unfortunately a major cost to the organization, because here is this valuable asset, this amazing employee who is burning the candle so bright that it's not sustainable.
Yeah. And as far as benefits go, I would imagine ensuring that if a medication is needed, that that's paid for by insurance, that we have EAP programs for them, that there's therapy available. I would imagine all of those benefits would be beneficial as well. Is there anything I missed there?
Well, and allowing for
Uh,
environmental accommodations in terms of the big light, temperature changes, or, fans on the desk
mhm.
and these kinds of things to support the to support the supports that they
Yeah,
need.
yeah, yeah. Makes sense.
So, if you were to say, what is one myth about ADHD or autism in high performing women that we need to dismantle, what would you say that is?
One myth about ADHD and autism in women. Um, the the easy one that I was faced with actually right out of a client's mouth was that they are masculine presenting. And I was just so thrown by that because I asked, for clarification. I'm like, no, that can't be me. What was it? I don't behave like a man. I don't dress like a man. This idea that the ADHD and autistic traits were male traits. That this idea
Oh,
that the
mm,
aggression, the blurting, all of these different things that are societally acceptable for a man to present with are not for a woman. Because, like, when a man is assertive in the workplace, a woman is aggressive. And if a woman is aggressive, she's hormonal.
Yes.
And so these myths around understanding, I guess maybe the double standard would be the biggest thing to break down because women, their neurodivergence presents completely differently than male neurodivergence. And so, oh, there you go. I apologize. And the better one is women that are doing it all. The idea that women can just do it all and that it doesn't come with a cost. That's one we need to break down because women that are holding it together, how does she do it?
mm.
She's not. She's
She's
dying.
breaking down on the
Right.
inside.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's true whether you have ADHD, autism,
Yeah.
or not.
Hmm.
Right.
As a living, breathing human.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Exactly. Yeah. What did we not ask you that you think is really important to our listeners that they should take in from today's conversation?
I think a big one that I want to point out is the common patterns. The ways that you can identify, like when you're thinking, oh, you know what, that reminds me of Sheila, and those kinds of things. Ideas around this is someone who has exceptional strategic thinking, but they have difficulty with administrative tasks. Like they are phenomenal on the brainstorming, but when it comes to doing the notes from the meeting, they just fall apart. The innovation, but they can't handle inefficient processes. Like if how we order the paper for the copier is a flawed system, and this person can't leave it alone. Sheila
Mm,
just keeps talking about why, well, this is how we do it, Sheila. And she just holds on to the injustice of it or the inefficiency of it. Um, Deep focus along with ability to pivot to different tasks quickly. And
mm,
these are all different aspects, different traits that if you can identify them, if they keep dinging for someone that you're thinking of, that's because their neurodivergence is apparent. And the easy one that is easy to dismiss is sensory fatigue because
Yeah.
like, oh, that's just how they are.
hmm
Is it though? Or is it the fact that they can't tolerate the sensory stimulation, whether it's the noise, whether it is the uncomfortable chairs or the wrong height of the chairs or the walk into the building and these different sensory stimulation activities. Staying aware of those kinds of things will help give you as the leader, if you're looking for who to support, looking at that. And then depending on where it is, if it then becomes a performance issue,
mm.
having conversations around is this a protected status? Because autism is a protected status.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
giving yourself permission to, however that looks in the workplace, probably folding in HR, but if you want to keep this valuable employee, recognizing those patterns and supporting them and creating a supportive environment, as opposed to, too much of a pain, put her on a PIP and get her out of here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
I
I
know.
mean, that's a huge thing. And I think you alluded to the fact that workplaces are not ready for that. And we should be looking out for that and supporting people so that women don't have to leave. Yeah.
100%.
And that is unfortunately the very scary reality that we are facing right now, because diversity is that's a bad word.
It's a bad
But
word. Mm-hmm.
right? But the
Mhm.
idea that diversity in the workplace in terms of lighting, work structure, these different thought processes, just diversity and how you think of what this job looks like actually enhances the success of the workplace, enhances the mission. And if leaders are able to lean into that, they will see the absolutely wonderful effects of having a more dynamic workforce.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chellie, it makes me think as you're listing off some of these characteristics, I guess, to recognize. Do you happen to have a checklist, or do you have resources that our audience can find that might be useful?
Oh, absolutely. I can make sure that Medovia has them. The easiest one right off the bat, I mentioned it earlier, is the ASRS. It is the Adult Sensory Recognition Survey, or no, Adult Self-Report Survey.
Okay.
It is literally just questions that you go down, and it's always, sometimes, often, never, one of
Yeah.
those types of things. And you go down, and the key piece is, as you fill it out, it is not whether or not you do it. It is if you have the desire to
Yeah.
do it, because as middle-aged women, we have already been trained as to what is socially appropriate and what is not. Beyond that, there are other self-reports. I know the RAT are, and I can give those to you. You can make them available to your listeners. There are, it is not like, these will not be diagnostic. You cannot
Yeah.
take this and be like, see, I have ADHD,
Yeah.
but it
Right.
gives you
Self-diagnosing and reflection. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
it gives you the starts of the conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
then as you begin to lean in, I know in Pennsylvania, we have the Attention Deficit Disorder Society that is
Right.
actually right outside of New York City, near by me. And it is this organization that disseminates information. It is available. They have the website. I will give you the links.
Great.
But
Right.
they are all just different resources about, like, how do you recognize sensory sensitivity? What does that even mean? And do I just not like wool? Am I allergic to wool? Or is it a tactile issue?
Mm-hmm.
And these kind of realities. Yes, there are
Fantastic.
vetted resources that are available that you just don't have to rely on TikTok videos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Yeah,
Good
we
for
want
you.
reliable resources. Yes.
Yes.
And where can our audience find you, Chellie?
I am actually building a website, so ChellieAdler.com will hopefully by the end of the month be available right
Okay,
now.
great.
But you can find me on LinkedIn, and I am Chellie Adler on TikTok, where I try very hard to make empowering and knowledgeable videos, because unfortunately, a lot of women in this situation have had some negative outcomes. I have had
Yeah.
to support a lot of women battling suicidal ideation, self-harm, a lot of these negative cognitive spaces that people are in. And so that is I'm attempting to use this vehicle to reach out as support of community, of this idea that you are not alone. I know you guys are doing great work with Medovia and M Factor and going around and spreading the information. In Pennsylvania, we have the PA Menopause Conference, where I am presenting Woman Unmasked, which is a scaffolded structure to help women unpack what is going on, to help you really dive into where you are cognitively and how to be okay Just be okay today and going forward, because this is a huge upheaval. This is a time of metamorphosis for women, and it's easy to not be okay.
Yeah.
So to trying to bring yourself to the place of, yes, I'm going through change, but I'm okay today. I'm going through change. It doesn't mean I'm broken. I'm going through change. I am not flawed as a human. Does that make sense?
All good reminders, right?
Such important work.
We get stuck sometimes, for sure.
Oh, the negative cognitions are plentiful.
Yes, they are. And everybody copes in a different way. But I think knowing more about yourself as you are helping women really helps bring some clarity. So thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you. You guys are having such a broad and dynamic impact nationally and internationally. And it's so wonderful to see, because as you know, here, boots on the ground, meeting with women. Just before we sat down, I had a woman in my office who was like, nobody talked to me. Nobody talked to me about menopause and what can happen. The conversations she has with me are the first ones she's having about the realities. And she has been seeing doctors for 15 years.
Yep.
And there is more conversation and more spaces that are needed. So let's both keep going.
Yeah, absolutely.
We will.
All right. So our last question in all of our podcasts is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
The best piece of advice I have ever received.
No pressure. I mean, ever makes it feel like, it's got to be the very best, but one that resonates with you.
It's a little coarse, so I apologize. I don't know if your listeners will be offended, but the best piece of advice I've ever gotten is, don't give a shit what anybody says. Because, and the reality is in menopause, like, I walk around with a fan in my purse right now because I am one of the women in this phase that has to have a fan, like, everywhere I go. So if I'm in line at Costco, I have my fan. If I am in the waiting room at the dentist, I have my fan. And I don't care if it bothers. It's a quiet fan. I make sure to be respectful of other people's spaces, but I'm going to be okay. And I don't give a shit if you're bothered by it.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's self-care. That's self-care. Yeah, radical self-care. So
there you go.
And acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's okay if I need a fan. And if somebody's bothered by it, it's their problem, not mine.
Yeah, not mine.
Right, right. Don't own that.
That's not for me to carry.
This was a great conversation, Chellie. I feel like maybe we have to have you back sometime because there's too much more to unpack. But I know that our listeners are going to appreciate the content. So thank you for being here with us today. It's been a really great conversation.
I appreciate you guys taking the time. I appreciate what you do. It's necessary. It's vital. And let's keep going.
Right.
Yeah. Let's keep going. And audience members, until we all meet again, go find joy in the journey. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Medovia Menopause Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for future episodes, leave a review, and share this episode with a friend. Medovia is out to change the narrative. Learn more at medovia.com. That's MIDOVIA.com.